Check, check, 1, 2, check, check, check. Hear me online, check, 1, 2.
We're meeting. Do. Can you hear me online? John, if you'll just tell me you can hear me, that'd be great. And then about to hear me. I don't know if it's working. Hello, hello. 900. It's not working in here. Hello. 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 Hey, Shannon, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. Nobody can. All right. Thank you, sir. Nobody else is. So they can hear you online. Perfect. Perfect. So you good, fun people can hear me online. Oh, right. Oh, oh, that's strange. Okay. All right, guys. So we are going to jump in and get started. This is your weekly team meeting, and I want to be respectful of your time. So we are going to jump right in this morning. Still have some stragglers. Tick tock, tick tock. He's not watching me. All right. So as we're kind of settling in, everybody having a good week so far. It's Tuesday. Yeah, good week. Does everybody like the weather? Can we agree on that? The weather's been nice, right? Markets seemingly it at the very minimum, it seems like we're getting some help from the market in that activity's up. Almost every metric that we track in terms of activity is up. And Lynn is back from vacation, so let's just hey Lynn. She's got a little bit of color in her skin. She's been enjoying herself. And now I don't know how much time she got to enjoy herself because we were on the phone all the time. So I'm not sure she really had that good of a time. But guys, we're grateful that you're here. We're grateful for this week. Things are starting to improve in a lot of ways. We have a lot of really good stuff coming up today. So we're just going to go ahead and jump on in. All right, guys. Connor, I'm going to ask you to come on up. Maybe it does work online. Good. All right, Connor. One, thank you so much from Unique Movers coming in. Thank you so much. But tell us a little bit about you, about your company, about your mission.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope everybody's day is going good. Mine was going great till I realized I spilled coffee on my shirt. So that set me off. So, but at any rate, I'm Connor with Unique Movers. I started this company 10, 11 years ago. Really to help individuals move, junk removal, product setup, product delivery. I moved a lot as a kid, so I figured it was kind of in my genes. I might as well keep it going. So I figured let's try to make a little bit of money doing it. So Unique Movers is based out of Sauk Rapids, St. Cloud area. That's where I started. I expanded to Brainerd, have a location up there. I recently opened up Elk River. Of all trades, master of none. However, we do have those masters within the company. So everybody kind of has their own beneficial side. So for example, our commercial side of things, we're helping out Burnix corporate. So moving all of their office furniture out while they get new furniture installed. New carpet installed as well. So our residential moving, we offer a lot of different things. We are offering night before loadout. So if they're closing on a Friday, we're going to come in Thursday hold their stuff, hold their goods until they're ready to unload on Friday. And then we'll deliver those upon closing or after closing. Another thing that we're offering is the junk removal. So we go in, take care of all the stuff that you don't want, you don't need. You will then try to find a home for it. We still do charge whether we find a home for it or not, because sometimes we get stuck with it. For example, COVID, we started taking a lot of furniture. I have semi-trailers full of stuff that we try to donate back to the counties, individual homes that are housing individuals. So we try to find a room for that. So yeah, we have a lot of great information online. You guys can check us out at uniquemoversmn.com. Our Facebook is really active. Our Instagram is really active. Our TikTok is really popular. So yeah, we're kind of doing everything. And I think one of my office girls had reached out to somebody in the office here, and you guys invited us down to, talk about us at lunch. And I figured, why not? We're already in the area. So we had to come down here and pick up some equipment. I have one of my good friends, one of my guys that helps me out all the time, Chris, with me today. So it was kind of nice. I worked hand in hand. He was able to do some stuff while I took out the stains out of my sweatshirt. So yeah. Any questions for me?
One of the easiest things, Connor, is tell us a little bit about the approach you take to your customer.
Sure, absolutely. So our main focus is obviously to be the best mover around, right? We're always going to run into those customers, those clients that are never happy, never satisfied. However, our job is to try to make that transition so much better. Moving is stressful the way it is. So our main focus is to go in, do as much stuff as possible that we can to make the move simple. So if we're taking apart beds, taking apart dining room tables, wrapping, protecting the furniture, wrapping, protecting the floors, new construction, especially old homes, we have a whole different kind of setup than just I don't mean to say it, but the 2 men in a truck theory. So we're going in with 4 movers, 5 movers, 6 movers. We have a job coming up on Friday. The customer requested 12 movers. So we'll have basically 3 teams. It's a 6,400 square foot home. So we'll go in with 3 teams and everybody will kind of focus on each stuff. We'll have a team that's packing and protecting, and we'll have a team that's disassembling, labeling, and then we'll have a team that's loading and stacking. Set it up that way. So yeah, we try to work with the other party as well. 9 times out of 10, depending the geographic area, we're moving one house, then we're moving the new people in, or vice versa. So yeah.
I really appreciate that. And connected. It's disconcerting. I appreciate that because you guys, one of the things that we talk a lot about, Connor, is value and how the value is shown to the consumer is starting to shift, and it includes moving, right? The idea is that how many of you want to move furniture? Want to move furniture? Yeah, nobody wants to move furniture. For a pizza and a beer from your buddy, I don't want that. I don't want to blow up my back. I don't want to. The value of being a really great real estate agent allows you an opportunity to provide a solution that doesn't include their best friend's truck and some pizza and beer, where they can actually have stuff moved in a professional setting that allows you to extend the value you provide by introducing them to somebody that says, hey, this is what we do and why we do it. So you don't have to blow out your back. So you don't have to worry about dropping a piece of furniture that's far too heavy for you to carry. This is the best way for us to start to deliver real value is alignment with a moving company that you can trust, that you've vetted, that can do something that most people don't want to do. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big thing, to make for a smooth transaction, similar to what you're saying, is establish our relationship beforehand. So now you're working with the team that's handling the goods, right? The whole point of it is to have everything be smooth as possible. So when you have a team like Unique Movers, of course, I'm going to uplift our company, right?
Yeah.
But you've really kind of brought that past the finish line and then some. I mean, just based on our reviews, everything has always been smooth. Now we do run into some errors and we run into some nicks and some cracks. Obviously, you're going to have that. But the best way that we can mold that over and do anything to help make that smooth transaction, we're all for it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Connor. Thanks so much, Unique Movers. And I didn't even recognize you spilled until you said it. So there you go. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks, Unique Movers.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you. Who has their next moving job lined up for Unique Movers? Where we at? All right, guys. We'll let him finish out that conversation. really only good at being told what to do. Rachel, tell me what to do. Go back to your office and make calls. All right, the value. Achieve together. How can we grow? So you guys check that out. It's going to be fantastic. Marcus is he's got a really good leadership vision and a really good delivery. So there we go again. Check that out on the 21st, 9 to 10 in here. You guys will see that in your inbox as well. All right. So you guys, we've had Greg here a few different times. Greg is a wealth of energy. Greg is a wealth of knowledge who brings a lot of energy to what we're doing. So working in the new post-settlement marketplace, Greg, it is yours to take away, my friend. And you're good to go.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Greg.
We're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about what's going on in terms of our local marketplace, the RMLS, the rules that we're going to have to, little changes that we'll have to adhere to, as well as we're going to be looking at the changes in the purchase agreement coming up roughly August 1st, the changes in the listing contract coming up August 1st. So what I'd like to do is just go through the whole presentation. I'll take questions. It's pertinent to what's on the screen. If you want to stop me and throw something in, but I'll hang around later to give you questions, but I think it helps to go through the whole thing first. But if somebody else has a burning question, please raise your hand. So next slide, young man. Thank you. Nationwide settlements. So as everybody knows, anywhere real estate settled, RE/MAX, Keller Williams settled, and then NAR jumped in with a settlement, and then recently Berkshire Hathaway Home Services finished up a settlement, and other companies are now starting to be, there's a window of opportunity for them to settle up with the lawsuits that are going on. Right now, I think the total amount of settlements is about $800 million. Either through NAR or various real estate franchises. And some of the next tier of real estate brokers are now being approached to open up their checkbook and make some donations to the cause. So these are nationwide settlements. And just as individual states have had different statutes, forms, and practices as to how real estate was conducted in their states, some of those same states, regions, local marketplaces, or MLSs may tailor their steps outside that boundary to see if there's going to be any snapback for them. In Minnesota, we've been doing things right for the last really 30 years when we instituted buyer agency back in about 1990. Now I say been doing things right, but it doesn't mean that we've been doing those things, right? Just because, there's a speeding law, right, Mr. Hiller? I'm sure you never speed, but, there was a requirement that we give agency at the first substantive contact. There was a requirement that before we perform any duties as a buyer's agent, we give them a buyer representation agreement, cover the language with them, the commitments of the parties. I wish we all practice what we were supposed to be doing before, but we'll have the least amount of adjustment, I think, out of almost all of the states in terms of what we've been practicing these last years. Some states will run risks into what they're going to do. So Minnesota and the MLS here is not going to jump outside that line till some other people have tested it. It doesn't seem prudent for us to spend more money on attorneys defending ourselves for something we shouldn't have done to begin with. So we're going to let others experiment and then see how that goes. Next slide. Zillow's response. Did anybody see Zillow's response a couple of weeks ago when they sent out a touring agreement? Zillow is worried about Zillow and Zillow's business, not worried about your business or you being in compliance with state law in any way, shape, or form. So they sent out a touring agreement. It's basically they saw it as an ability that you could still drop whatever you were doing to run and show either our listing or another broker's listing by using this touring agreement. Do not use it. You are in danger if you do this in Minnesota and in Wisconsin too. Those are the only two states I'm licensed in. But basically at the bottom it says Zillow makes no representations as to the legal validity or adequacy of any provision of this form in any specific transaction. So that's their get out of jail free while you're going to jail free. So don't use it in any way, shape, or form. You're not licensed to Zillow. You're licensed to Lynn here. She's responsible for everything you do 24 hours a day as it relates to real estate. So we got to keep Lynn happy. We got to keep Todd happy, but we got to keep the Commerce Department and the attorneys happy. So do not follow Zillow's instructions. What I'm going to tell you is follow what the brokerage policies are and the best practices that the state requires as well. It's not optional going forward. And, you know, while up to this point in time, break what some of the terms of the settlement are, think you're going to be the one that they directly come to. So we want to make sure we keep you compliant. We're going to be providing plenty of education, plenty of compliance when your forms get turned in, because we want to correct behavior before it becomes, you know, either other people choose to follow it here or it just becomes your standard of practice. We want to get it corrected right away. So Lynn's usually a little bit nicer than I am over in Maple Grove, but we'll be working together to make sure we're all on the same page here. So if you ever have any questions, reach out to Lynn. Next slide. Stay off the internet. I know I was here a couple of months ago and I told you to stay off the internet. Has anybody stayed off the internet since then? No. You guys can't follow simple instructions. But anyway, yeah, do not follow the stuff on the internet. I mean, whether it's Lab Code Agent or a lot of those other places, those are agents in all sorts of different states under all sorts of different brokerages or state practices. And reading it sometimes is interesting, but it shouldn't be anything that you use to follow, to figure out how to move this path moving forward in your real estate business. Next slide. It's going to change. So here's some things that are going to change, and I'm going to have to turn around to read some of them. The MLSs are going to be eliminate and prohibit any requirements of offer of compensation in the MLS between listing brokers or sellers, buyer brokers, and other buyer representatives. So this policy is in place right now. You can put a listing on MLS and offer to pay $0 to a buyer broker or $1 or whatever. Now, I don't know that that's in our best business practice to do that, but MLSs cannot require you to do that. And in Minnesota, it's been softened up over the years. So again, this is not a big change for us. The lawsuit also requires the MLSs to eliminate all broker compensation fields and compensation information on the MLS. So what's going to go away on your MLS sheet is the amount of compensation that you're willing to share with a buyer rep or with a non-represented or a facilitator agent. Those fields are going off of the MLS, and that'll happen probably in August. And you'll get plenty of notice, but it's going to make your job a little bit more difficult moving forward. The MLSs will no longer publish offers of cooperating brokers compensation on the MLS, period. Any field displaying commissions will be removed from input forms in MLS displays. Our MLS will be removing offers of compensation in our marketplace on August 9th. Now, I found that out because I'm also in the RMLS Board of Governors. So that's a pretty hard date that we have in our marketplace. So unless approval the other day of the 3 settlements, I'll get to you in a second. But count on about August 9th for those fields to be disappearing from MLS. Question. Oh, September 9th. I'll confirm that again. I got a whole, but there's 30 some slides here. I've been known to make a mistake once in a while. But I will get that back if it's different. Question. Yes, sir.
Still being out of
if your seller in your listing contract wants to offer compensation to a buyer's representative, that'll still be in our listing contract. That will not change. And we'll be able to that out to the world, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide. Prohibit the use of MLS data or data feeds to directly or indirectly establish or maintain a platform of offers of compensation from multiple brokers or other buyer representatives. What it basically says is probably on Kate and Todd and is communicating with this too. Your office website, right, will have your listing inventory along with everybody else's because we do an IDX share, right? So we're able to have Edina's and Coldwell Bankers and everybody else's listings. On our listings only, they'll be able to have the offer of compensation to a buyer's broker in there. What we cannot do is get together with a bunch of brokers and say, hey, why don't we create this Minneapolis MLS co-op fee.com. You put all your listings on there, put all our listings on there. We'll just have the address and the amount of compensation offered. You can't do that in any way, shape, or form. So we're prohibited from doing that, which is going to make your job as a buyer's agent a little bit more difficult, right? I'm going to show Greg's house today. He's at another brokerage. I wonder what kind of compensation he's going to offer. I don't know. Does everybody have this little device that you probably plug in every night? I see one right there. What's a telephone? You're probably, as a listing agent, are going to get a lot more phone calls. I'd advise you to start answering them because it might be a question from me saying, hey, I'd like to show your house at 1234 Main Street. What's the amount of compensation that you're willing to pay me? So I don't know how all of this is going to shake out. The fact that you're with a large franchisor and you're with a large brokerage, can you imagine what this is going to be like if you were at a company of 30 agents, 40 agents or less? How are they going to handle that? I mean, you guys have front. This particular issue, is your listing not going to get shown, right?
Chris has said that it won't be a problem to be able to display on our websites what the offer of compensation is going to be. And the way I would look at that is that that's a benefit for all of you. You're in a interview with a prospective seller and let them know that, well, look, we are the company where it's well known that can help you achieve a higher sales price because everybody knows they can go to our website and they can look up the offer of compensation. Now, is it possible that some other companies that are using other platforms, that those platforms would be able to adjust and offer compensation? Maybe, but at this point, we know that we will be able to do that, even though it's not being pulled from the MLS as it is now. Again, is going to be a benefit to the seller. And when you tell them you plan to invite all 22,000 agents in the state of Minnesota, a real estate license that may be working with a prospective buyer that fits their property, and that will help them get a higher sales price.
Thanks, Todd. Another thing, if anybody tries to create this network of different brokerages all going together to make one simple website and create the sharing of compensation, the MLSs will terminate their access, period, key out of the MLS. So they've kind of thought of everything, the what ifs, right? And if any of you have had kids or been a kid, you know that they always try to do something else. They've thought of that. The lawsuit also says that reinforcing the MLS participants and subscribers must not enable the ability to filter out listings by compensation offered. So I don't think we are doing in this marketplace. We've been accused of steering, steering from the standpoint of not showing you homes in an area or anything like that, but not showing you homes because of the compensation that was offered in the MLS sheet. That might have happened in other marketplaces. It's a great accusation to make to get headlines. I don't think we've seen it here, but you won't be able to, and because when your office puts a listing into MLS, you so I'm not going to show this one because the compensation isn't what I'm worth, what I've negotiated with my buyer, and my buyer doesn't have ability to pay, so I just won't pay it. So they're saying you can't filter that out. We require compensation disclosures to sellers and prospective sellers and buyers. We've been doing that for years. Nothing new there, right? We've all done listing contracts where the commission, right in there, it says notice of compensation is negotiable. And then if you put in a number, I don't think there's a seller that could argue that they've signed a listing sheet, didn't understand the number in the number field, right? Same way with our buyer rep field. So this will not be new to us. Next slide. What's going to change? Brokers can still offer commissions on their own listings via their own websites or other non-MLS channels. We've talked about that. Questions? Next one. Don't try to get cute. Cannot add commission information on supplements, agent comments, photos. There's 3 oranges on the kitchen counter. Figure it out. You can't do the list price like $499,027. So you can't get cute. Or any other place that some genius might think to try to shortcut the rules. The MLS is not going to allow it, number one. Again, you'll lose your access. And number 2, as a brokerage, we can't afford, right, to have people not in compliance. So, when this first started coming out, I'm over in the Maple Grove office, agents were going like, well, how can I get around this? It's like, can't. So, but anyway, so don't look for a shortcut because it isn't going to work. Next one. Session. At this time, and there was initial talk that we were going to remove the commissions fields into the RMLS, just add a concessions field where you could put in a dollar amount or a percentage the seller was willing to help the buyer fund the transaction. At this point in time, RMLS has decided not to put in a concessions field. And those concessions could be for anything, right? Seller paid closing costs, a carpet allowance, anything that we've typically done in the past. It could have been commissions. So there will not be a concessions field in there. However, what the thought is, some agents in their MLS display under agent remarks will list sellers offering, and just to pick a number, $14,000 worth of concessions to help the buyer into the property. And when we do that, we can't say that 14 grand is only reserved for a buyer's broker's commission, right? Because there might be an agent out there willing to do the deal for 1%, right? And let's just say that was $4,000. Just reduce their offer price if they're not going to burn up that money. There might be some buyers that say, hey, I'm gonna fund my agent myself. I don't want the seller to do any of that. I see a seller's offering 14 grand. I'm just going to knock that off my offer. So as a listing agent, when you start doing net sheets, you're going to have to be very careful. Look at the terms of that purchase agreement when you're doing that net sheet to make sure you're accounting for all of those things, right? A seller might look and go, well, you got an offer for 300 and you got an offer for 286, and that might be the better offer because he's not asking for any of the concession dollars, right? So that's how probably, I'm going to guess that a fair amount of our marketplace will do that. What that'll do for you in just a second. As a listing agent, might eliminate the phone calls. Right? You might say, look, I got a $400,000 listing. My seller's going to offer $12,000 worth of concessions. I, as a buyer's agent, could go to my buyer and go, look, it looks like my commission would be covered because you and I, Mr. Buyer, have a commission agreement for 3%. In fact, there might be a little bit of extra dollars there to do something else with. So I'm going to guess a fair part of the market is probably in the first line in the agent remarks is going to be concessions offered.
It's an offer seller concessions to the buyer. Is there any reason not to use?
So the question is, if in theory, and I'm going to put something in concessions so I don't, so the agents will know and I don't have to make those phone calls, right? Can I put in, instead of a dollar amount, can I put in a percentage? Certainly. Right. So if your seller says, look, I'm good with 3% concessions, great, then write in 3%. Now remember, that's of the gross selling price. And so I'll give you an example. A seller's got a $400,000 house. You offer $400,000. Buyer wants, right, that concessions that you're offering of 3% to go towards his agent's compensation. But the buyer additionally wants $5,000 for seller paid closing costs, right? We always pay commissions on the gross selling price, not a net selling price. And the MLS might decide to change and add a concessions field. So we're going to see how some of the other marketplaces that are throwing that in, see if they get any pushback from the attorneys, the Department of Justice, and we might add that to our MLS at some point down the road. Yes, sir. Will that play into financing requirements, like in terms of like FHA, VA, and some of the low down payment programs, or? Well, I would hate to be an appraiser right now. I mean, you got 5 houses in a row, right? They're all identical. They're all on the same street. They all sell at the same time. This guy sells at 400 with full compensation to listing and operating broker. This guy offers partial compensation to a buyer broker. This guy offers nothing to a buyer broker, right? And some of them have closing. It'll be interesting. I wouldn't want to be in their place. And this is the financing programs, FHA, VA, they're all getting on board and realize that they do not want unrepresented buyers buying properties. I mean, think of that. If you were giving out millions and millions in mortgages, some of them are risky no matter what, right? Well, I think we all believe that buyers have the right to have representation just like a seller does. I think it's in the lender's best interest to know that that buyer, certain degree, was protected in that transaction. Now, how well depends on how good of an agent they had, perhaps, right? Sorry. I've heard they're working on it. Look, they've got some time yet to. The question was on VA. They haven't come up with an official statement other than saying they don't consider these dollars to be, let's call it funds paid on behalf of the buyer outside of what's norm. In other words, before you couldn't have, somebody contributing to a VA buyer's down payment and or closing costs, somebody outside the buyer, VA, right, and or a seller. So they don't view this commission payment as an issue. Now, you would agree at some level it's a problem, right? If Greg had a 10% buyer broker agreement, right? So reasonable fees, I think, are not going to be an issue. Next, changes in the listing contract. Okay, the Forms Committee at the Minnesota Association of Realtors about 2 weeks ago met, and they've been kicking around language for a couple of months. Said, what are we going to do to change the listing contract? I'm going to have to do some training on this because this language, along with what's in the purchase agreement, can be confusing on how it's used and filled out. Now, I don't want anybody to ever, have a seller sign a PA where compensation is more than what you maybe told them it was going to be. And I'll show you in a second how it gets confusing. So we're going to do some specific training on this. These 2 changes will screw people up. And there will be people at closing that said, I didn't know I was paying 5% to the buyer broker. And it's like, yeah. So, yeah. So This is what was approved a couple of weeks ago. Again, it's not going to kick in until the next forms changes, August 1st-ish. So the language that's going to get added says, if the seller agrees, pay buyer's broker compensation directly to buyer's broker, and seller's obligation, pay broker's compensation as specified on line 119 and 120, shall be reduced by the amount paid up to blank dollars or blank percent of the sales price. Now, if you remember in our current listing contract, it says seller agrees to pay me, the listing broker, whatever dollars or commission rate, and let's just say 7% for today's example. And then further on in our listing contract, it does say seller allows the listing broker to take his 7% and let's use an example and pay 3% to a buyer broker. That language is going to stay in the purchase agreement, where it comes, the commission comes from the seller to the listing broker to the buyer's agent. Okay. This says the seller agrees to directly compensate the buyer's agent, which might be language in the purchase agreement. Okay. Well, that's where things can get screwed up. So language regarding retainer fees and co-op broker fees are going to stay the same. And I recommend taking all of your listings at your normal preferred rate. And here's why. Is there a chance that you're going to sell your own listing? And the buyer's broker can figure out how they're getting compensated. And then somebody else in the office here has a buyer for that property, shows that property, or has an open house for you or whatever, or are they going to get compensated at the end of the day when you only took care of you on the list side? I think if you're the listing agent and the selling agent, and if you're fortunate to either have your own buyer that you've shown it to or pick up your own buyer during the term of the contract, whether you create a dual agency or not with that buyer, don't you deserve to be paid for two sides of the business? So I'm going to encourage you to take your listings at what you've been taking them at for years. And then having a discussion with the seller, what kind of compensation you're going to offer to another agent. You might go to variable rate commission. We might suggest that to you, you know, where the seller looks at you and says, really, Nick, do you need 7%? And if you sell it yourself, and Nick might say, well, Mr. Seller, tell you what, if I'm fortunate enough to bring in the buyer myself, I'll reduce it to 6%. And, you know, so we'll have those conversations so that you're all prepared and comfortable for how you want to run your business, right? We want to give you guardrails for your business and help you understand and, you know, that you've got those options. Any questions on that screen? So that's the only change into the listing contract. Let's go to the next one. Changes in the PA. These are the only changes in the PA right now related to the lawsuits. Look, might they change a comma someplace else in the agreement that's irrelevant to this discussion? Yeah. So this is going to be the change that they approved as of April of 24. I don't think it's going to change, but it might. I'll let you know. So after the dual agency language, remember in the purchase agreement where there's those lines where, you know, Greg Hartos, KW is the listing agent and Joe Blow at ABC Realty represents the buyer. Okay, then the next section is whether dual agency does apply or doesn't apply, right? You check yes or no. If it's yes, then everybody signs there. Well, right below that section, there's going to be a heading, so big black bold print, seller's contributions to buyer's broker's compensation. This is where the buyer and their agent are showing you how the compensation is going to work in this transaction. If they're expecting anything above what you offered on MLS, right? So that's the header. And the next language is this amount is in addition to the okay, it's that 2% plus whatever they ask for here. This is where it gets confusing. So line 426, seller is or is not contributing to buyer's broker's compensation at closing. If answer is, Seller agrees to pay buyer's broker's compensation at closing blank percent of the selling price for blank dollars. So this is additional dollars above what you told me your seller was going to contribute in your listing agreement when I called you as a listing agent. Seller's contributions to buyer's closing cost compensation is in addition to any seller's contribution to buyer's closing costs paid at closing. So you're going to have to closely look at the purchase agreement, right? Because before there's a box seller is or is not contributing to buyer's closing costs. And let's say the seller in this particular PA was to the tune of $5,000, right? And then let's say you offered me 2% as a selling agent to sell your listing. And let's say I offered, just to be tricky, another $5,000. Well, it's $5,000 for closing costs. It's $5,000 for commission plus the 2 that you were offering me. So can you see how this might get confusing at the end of the day? Let's go to the next slide. So be aware, and caution. If the seller offers 2% buyer agent compensation in your listing agreement, and the PA calls for the buyer's broker to be compensated 3%, the seller will be authorizing 5% to be paid to the buyer agent. You can see how that's tricky. Some of you might say, well, we offered 2 and he wants 3. I only need to pay him 1. It's like, no. On a total of 2 plus 3. When I went to school, that's still 5. I'm not sure. It might be a different number now. Well, the same would be true if the seller offered 2% and the PA calls for the buyer broker to be paid 2%, then the seller will be authorizing 4%. So don't assume anything when you see this in a purchase agreement. Hey, Greg, see you sent over the purchase agreement. Thanks a lot. You remember I was offering you 2%? Yes. I see in the purchase agreement, he asked for 2%. Yes. So Greg, is that 2 plus 2 is 4? Or were you just expecting a total of 2%? In which case, and we better clean up the agreements, right? Either the purchase agreement puts 0 because we're getting 2 anyway, right? But we need to counter or correct that initially before my seller signs off on the PA. One of the other key things to keep in mind is an agent can not get paid more for what they've contracted. And I know many of you probably have had buyer rep agreements through the years, right? You might have put, let's say, 3% in there. And all of a sudden you go out to Lennar and Lennar says, hey, if they buy this house, it's a 5% commission. You will in the future not be able to take anything more than what's in your buyer rep agreement. It has to be a percentage or a dollar amount. You cannot list in there as offered by builder or as listed on MLS or Penny O'Reilly can negotiate. You have to give them a number or a dollar amount, and then you're not entitled to get a penny more than that. You can willingly take less. So you don't have to. I mean, as a result of this lawsuit, I think it's going to be easier to go to a buyer and say, we predetermined what my fee was going to be. And Greg, you've been such a pain in the rump. I've been working with you for 9 months, showed you 300 homes, never wrote a good offer. I'm going to collect the full fee on this one. So I think there'll be less wiggle room, but you can always do that to, turn to a client and go, well, math didn't add up between what they were offering and what we had negotiated. I'll go to my broker and twist her arm and we'll take less, but can you send me a buyer, right? Any other questions? Yes, sir. Okay, great question. So right now in the MLS sheet, when a broker has published something, you can take that to the bank unless it changes. Yeah, this is going to be post, right? So the question is right now I can look at the MLS sheet and know that I'm going to get paid this unless I choose to negotiate some away, right? That's what the listing broker promises to pay my broker. Now I'm going to rely on a phone call to you that says, hey, unless you have concessions listed in the MLS, right? I'm going to call you and you're going to say, yeah, Greg, it's 2%. Well, are you going to remember that tomorrow or am I going to write it down wrong, right? And so then the question would be, I would probably fire off an email to you. Hey, nice talking to you today at 11:15 on the property 1234 Main Street. You confirm that the commission paid to my broker will be 2%. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so there's going to be a little growing pains here how we do it. I never want to get shorted as a buyer's agent, so I will be writing those emails. Right? Now, you as a courteous listing agent, you might go, Greg, why don't I just fire off an email to you now confirming that? Now, if it changed a week from now, that's different, but today's offer is this. So confirm with buyer's broker before presenting any offers when there's confusion. The language corrected before presenting APA. Hey, Greg, you wanted 2 + 2. No, I just wanted 2. Greg Brown should rewrite your offer and send it over to me. Who do you think should pay for the problem if there's an issue? I'm the listing agent, read your agreement, offered you the compensation. Now it's 5%. I think I need to look in the mirror and go, I made a mistake because I just made my seller agree to 5%. Right? Next slide. Changes in the buyer rep contract. None. Zero. Zilch. As a result of this lawsuit, they put in some other language or correct some word, yes, but as a result of the lawsuit, there's nothing changing in our buyer rep. The commission of blank percent or blank dollars, whichever is greater. And then it gives us a blank to fill in the BAC fee for our brokerage, right? So our blanks have been pretty clear. Now, agents have gotten creative. Instead of putting a number in the commission box, you put as listed in MLS or whatever the builder offers. Either of those, the last time I checked, was an actual number. Those are words. They're not numbers. So you need to put a number in. And I'm going to urge you to be cautious because some agents might say, I'm going to offer a buyer rep agreement at 1% because I think I can lock up 50 buyers that way overnight, right? Because you're charging 3%. And keep in mind that you can only collect the 1% then. Right? So there may be people out there that go, I'll do some special arrangement or I'll do a facilitator agreement for $X. Well, they're locked into that now unless they amend that agreement. Can I amend the agreement? So I'll give you an example. Go to Lennar and Lennar goes, oh, there's a $5,000 bonus on this and on top of our 2% commission. And you go, well, that's great, but that puts me over the top. Could you turn to your buyer and say, look, there's a $5,000 bonus available for you, right? Because I can't take it. And the buyer might say, you've been working so hard and so long and we love the business. We want you to have that. You can go ahead and amend buyer rep agreement to include that. Before sign the agreement, not afterwards. Hey, I forgot to tell you 3 weeks ago, the builder was offering me a $5,000 bonus. You sign this agreement now. It's like, no. So you have to do it before you change compensation. So remember, before we can show even our own listings, we must have the buyer signed to do an agency disclosure. That's not an option. Been that way for years. Agent was fined $3,000 because he didn't get one signed soon enough. So I think the state of Minnesota considers them pretty important. So agency disclosure before you go any further. And I'm going to guess we're going to end as a listing agent, you're going to show more of your own listings. You're going to get those calls because if I call our friends at Edina Realty, right, either off their website or Zillow or somebody referred me to an Edina agent, and he says, well, Greg, love to show you the house, but you're going to have to sign agency disclosure and a buyer rep or a facilitator agreement with me. I'm going to go, don't want to do that. I'll just call the listing agent because all he's going to make me sign is an agency disclosure. That's okay. We can show our own listings. By our own, I mean my listings or brokerages. At the end of the day, all listings belong to all of us, right? So we can show our own listings, own brokerage listings, without anything more than an agency disclosure. Now, would you? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I'd like to get every buyer into a buyer rep agreement, right? But at the end of the day, we can show our own brokerages listings with just an agency disclosure before you walk them in the front door, by the way. Question? This one or that one? Agency. It's not me. Got that one right. I'm 1 for 2 on questionable calls here today, but that's just an agency disclosure on our listings. Yep. Well, okay, so so we can get them across the door to look at the house, right? And as a listing agent, in advance, you might have determined, look, sellers are my best friend. Just met Alec, right? I'm not going to offer him a buyer rep agreement, even if he's interested. I will give him agency. I will tell him I represent the sellers. Love to write all this. And as a listing agent, your decision is whether you're going to, go into a dual agency with a potential buyer, whether they came off the open house, a sign call, or whatever. There might be other buyers working with somebody in this office already that has a buyer rep agreement. And that decision's kind of been made for you. There changes in yes, you will, and this is the rule that hasn't changed. We can only have our own listings open. We're not going to do FSBOs. Not going to, a friend of mine at Edina Realty that doesn't live in my neighborhood. He lives on the other end of the town. Says, Greg, can you have my listing open? No, our listings, I would recommend having a sign-in sheet, having a stack of agency, and making them sign that. I sign both in, because here's what I think is going to happen, right? Buyers are going to get lazy, smart, tricky, whatever, and they'll just go, I'm going to go run through a whole bunch of open houses. And then when I see one I like, then I'm going to call my friend up and hire him. Now, look, I'd be welcome as a listing agent to sell my seller's house to anybody, but isn't there maybe a procuring cause and a commission issue? I have to cooperate. I don't necessarily need to compensate. So as a listing agent, I would say nobody comes in beyond the front door without signing in their name, and if they're working with another broker, tell me now. Are you under contract with anybody else? Yes. Who and what company? Their name, their number. Most of the time people say, yeah, I am. And guess what? They're not. Same people that say, I'm going to call my attorney, that never do. Right. So I'm thinking we're going to show more of our own listings. And if you're going to do that, I want to make sure that the proper paperwork. So if there's a commission dispute, the last thing you want is me 4 days later to call you up and say, I got an offer for you. And you look and go, Greg never showed it. And you go, that must have been the guy that I took time out of my day on Monday and rearranged my kids' daycare to show them the house. I want you to be protected. There will be, in my opinion, there'll be more commission disputes, and I want you to win all of them. You can use that as a way to, these were the people that were here at 3 o'clock Monday. Look, I made them sign this sucker. Oh. Well, look, I don't personally, other than working through a few wrinkles here, I don't think much is going to change. I think compensation rates are going to stay about where they are. I mean, even if you read Consumer Federation of America's website, which is part of the start to where this mess started incubating, they don't think rates are, they think it might be more costly to begin with. And I think good agents are probably going to consider charging more. A better buyer's agent than you. Roseville's listings, not KW isn't your brokerage, right? Roseville, KW Integrity, right? So any of your listings you can show without anything more than that. I would always recommend the agency disclosure. You are yawning. It's bad. It's better. Okay, next slide. What if I don't comply? So this is the attorney that handled the Burnett Sitzer lawsuit. Under the law, once the settlement is finally approved, anyone, and that's 0.5 million realtors, right? Anyone covered by the agreement is required to abide by it. We believe as a class counsel that somebody is not abiding by the agreement can take appropriate steps. I'm going to guess they'll first go after the individual. And if the individual says, well, my broker doesn't require me, in fact, everybody in my office is doing this, then I think they'll go to the brokerage as the next step. I think initially they're going to go after you, which is where, right, if what you do at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So if you aren't, right, great, have compliance, but I don't know if we're timely doing stuff. So I think they will go after individual agents. And if Greg were smart, which he's not, he would quit this job and go on a commission basis with these guys and find you guys all day long. And then after about 6 months, I'll retire and you'll never see me again. I mean, when you say the average commission is what, 10 grand, just to pick a number? I think the fine should be maybe 12. Since you have to dig into your pocket, right? And then you'll tell everybody else in here. So there will be compliance. So they pursue you individually, and then the MLS can also provide enforcement. Unfortunately, the MLS is going to have to provide enforcement for some of these things. Not equipped to do it. Don't have staff to do it. Don't know what they have to do to enforce it, but the MLS is going to be the one, and they're the ones that can cut off your lifeblood, which is MLS access, right? I think there'll be a few people that will volunteer to be idiots and probably lose their ability to move business. Next slide. How can I get paid? So this is a question, and we've addressed this before. How can I get paid? I can't go to the listing agent and say, hey, your seller is offering 2% compensation. I want you, Mr. Listing Agent, go to your seller and tell them they should pay me 3%. So I can't do that. I can't attempt to renegotiate, the listing broker and the seller's contract to benefit me. But can I still get what my buyer and I agreed for compensation? Remember, we talked about this last time, the language that you're going to put into a purchase agreement between now and August to assure yourself you're going to get paid whatever you're going to get paid. The PA changes and puts that new language in. So Article 16 says you can't use an offer terms to try to get either the listing broker to get the seller to tweak their listing agreement. I can call up a listing broker and say, I see you're offering 2, will you pay me 3? And they might go, sure, but I can't make them do that. Or can I make them seller pay a higher commission to him so he can pay me more either? So next slide. How can I get paid? So between now and August, if you're showing MLS property, and it doesn't fulfill the buyer's obligation under your buyer rep agreement, compensation, right? The buyer and I sat down, I sold them on me and my services and what a swell guy I am. And I said, I want I'm worth 3.5%. And the buyer says, Greg, you're worth that. I get it. Right? Whether they've interviewed 10 other people or just me, right? They said, Greg, I get it. You're worth 3.5%. So I go out and show some MLS listings. And let's say the one they like offers 3% compensation today. This is what you should put into the PA to make sure you get the missing 0.5%. So the seller agrees to pay, in your case, Keller Williams, Integrity Realty, 0.5%. That's the missing money, right? The selling price at closing to fulfill buyer's obligation under their buyer rep agreement. So I know right now some brokers are experimenting with what they're doing on MLS. I still want you to show the houses. I still want you to sell the houses. I still want you to get paid. But the important thing is having that conversation with the buyer up front. What you're getting, what I'm worth, so that you won't have a problem with this. It's ethical, it's legal, right? So this is the language you'll use right now if something isn't fulfilling your compensation. Now, keep in mind, we're going to have a period of time where we're going to have some old rules and then some new rules. And so this might save you until then. Fill your need, right? You told me what your parameters were. I just sent you some. They call that working with the buyer. Arranging for the buyer to tour a property, virtually or in person. performing or facilitating negotiations on behalf of the buyer, sending offers by the buyer or other services for the buyer. Now, those are different than, for instance, if I was I had a buyer seminar here this weekend, right? 10 people came in. I'm going to talk to them about the whole process of buying a house. I don't have to have them sign to a buyer rep agreement to have that class for them. I should probably give them agency because somebody's going to stand up and say, I got 10 grand and I qualify for 300. So I should give them agency up front. I do not have to have, I'm not working with them technically yet. They haven't selected me. I haven't shown them any homes. If an MLS participant is working only as an agent or sub-agent of the seller, then the participant is not working with the buyer. In other words, when we show our own listings in this brokerage. And authorized dual agents. In other words, you've got the buyer, he's got the listing. You can show his property because you already have an agreement with that buyer. Next slide. Does it mean to tour a home? So people have said, well, what if I do a virtual showing, right? It's just me, the agent showing up, but my client's in Poughkeepsie and they can't be here. So I go do a virtual showing, right? That's different than them looking at the 50 photos on MLS or looking at the virtual tour on MLS, which maybe I sent them. But if I'm standing in the house with my phone and they say, hey, can you run to the kitchen again? That's a showing. So I have to have an agreement with them. And a home means a residential property, 1 to 4 units. Anything over that is commercial. Don't necessarily need to follow these rules. You should. It's good business practice, but you don't need to. From the gas station on the corner, don't need to worry about this. Next slide. Does a requirement for a written agreement with buyers mean MLS participants and buyers must enter into a written agency agreement? So we have the agency disclosure, not to be confused with an agency agreement. Remember, this is all 50 states. A lot of them have done things wrong. So in Minnesota, I've been doing it right, or should have been doing it right, but it does say that you have to use an agreement approved by the state. So in the state of Minnesota, to be working with a buyer right now, I either have a buyer rep agreement, exclusive or non-exclusive, and or I could have a facility. I want to look at this listing. It happens to be listed by our friends at Edina Realty. You have to have some kind of agreement with me. Right? You say, well, Greg, I'm going to send you a buyer rep agreement. And I go, well, I hope it doesn't run forever. And you go, well, Greg, I'll do one that just covers the property at 1234 Main Street. Go look at another house tomorrow with another agent. You can sign a one-time buyer rep agreement on that one. But my agreement would only be for 1 day, 1 week, 1 property, whatever it might be. And that's going to get people over the initial hump of I don't want to look at any homes with any other agent other than the listing agent. Compensation is spelled out. So here's where some agents are going to have a problem when they offer a menu of services, right? We'll show you homes. It's $200 a home. Want to write a PA? It's another $800. You want me to do a walkthrough? Want me to arrange an inspection? So we need to make sure their whole menu of services lists everything that they might charge for at the end of the day. Keep in mind, if you're going to charge per showing, and the buyer's going to pay you, where does that money go? Was still in. It goes to the brokerage. So you can't say, I'll charge you $200 a showing, and then they slap $200 in your pocket. You need to run it back here and deposit it with the brokerage, right? So you can't get compensated for real estate actions without it going through the broker. Any questions on that? Okay. What does it mean to be inconsistent with state or federal law? Some people will probably find out. But it does say all MLS participants working with the buyer must have a written buyer agreement prior to touring, unless state law requires an agreement earlier than that. So before you walk somebody through a door, you need to have, again, in Minnesota, buyer rep agreement, exclusive or non-exclusive, or a facilitator contract, spelling out your compensation expected if you sell them that property. Next one. Open houses. We can have our own open houses. I would suggest you get everybody to register, sign in, give them agency, and then follow up with them if an offer comes in. Because there might be a time where it's your listing, but I am having the open house for you. I'm picking up some leads, and 3 days later you get an offer. You might want to come back to me and say, hey, Greg, did you collect names of everybody that was there on Sunday? I go, yeah. And you go, was Bob and Sherry Smith on there? I go, yeah. And you say, well, they're coming back with another agent now. And I go, look, I want you to get the sale together. I don't want to pay that other broker. I think, you know, I invested my time on Sunday. So listing agents and let's call it open house agents of not their own listings. I want to have conversations when offers come in. You would hate, I think you would hate if I was in the same office with you, you relied on me to do open houses for you, for me to come up and say, hey, they bought, and you go, well, I don't care about you, Greg. No, I was worried about my friend at ABC Realty that brought in the offer. So we're going to want to do that, which is an advantage to us as a large brokerage with lots of listings, and we can get out into the community. Can you imagine being at a brokerage where they've got no listings? Or you can build your business. So it's a great benefit of being in a large office like this. Next slide. Seller only agents. There are some agents, listing agents say, I'm never going to enter into a dual agency, right? Somebody can come through my open house, call my sign, whatever. Don't need to put them under a buyer rep agreement. Next slide. Working with buyers, are written buyer agreements required? And we are showing, and when it says MLS participants, that's another brokerage's listings, whether it's another KW office or Edina Realty or whatever. So yes, this does trigger the written agreement with the buyer. Next slide. Facilitator in Minnesota, right? I give you agency and I am now an informal facilitator for you because we've signed no other agreement spelling out what my duties or your responsibilities are. So in Minnesota, I'd encourage you to give them agency. And then if you can't get them under a buyer rep agreement, use the buyer facilitator agreement, check the things that you're going to do for them, and then fill in your compensation at the end of the day. And yes, you can amend that. Hey, you wanted me to this, that, and the other thing. Well, that's an additional fee, but make sure you use those timely before you do anything so that they understand what that fee is, or you won't get paid a portion of the fee. Next one. Dual agency in Minnesota, we're used to dual agency. In other states, they're wrestling with all of this stuff. I mean, I read an agent the other day, he's been in a state with buyer rep agreements for 22 years. They were optional. He never used them because he didn't think they were any good. He said he sat down, spent 90 minutes reading it, and it makes sense. It's like, oh, should have been using it for the last 20 years. Anyway, so you understand dual agency in Minnesota when we're involved in our own brokerages transactions. Next one. Minnesota requirements for the lawsuits. Do written buyer agreement change my state's disclosure requirements to an unrepresented buyer? No, you must still comply with all your state and agency regulations. Slide. Minnesota requirements. Written buyer agreements will be required of all MLS participants with buyers prior to touring your home unless state law requires a written buyer agreement earlier. Minnesota statutes require agency and buyer rep before you can represent me. Before you can call me your buyer, before you can on my, need to have a buyer rep agreement signed. Next slide. But you can do a flat fee, a percent, an hourly rate, all of those things, as long as it fulfills the company policies. Any compensation agreed to must be objectively ascertainable and not open-ended, as listed on MLS. That's not a number. So you got to have numbers or dollar amounts in there. Slide. Amending a buyer rep. Can I do that? I'm halfway into a transaction. Greg seems like a lot more work. I showed him one house. He was going to buy it, right? I negotiated a fee with that one. That sale never came together. Greg now wants to see 10 more houses, right? 7 more offers. You can amend your agreement, but you have to do it before I say that's the house. Let's write up an offer. Next one. We're almost done. Anybody sleeping? You can start waking up. Is there an NAR MLS policy about seller concessions? No. The NAR nationally did not institute any policy, and that's what part of this lawsuit is about. NAR does not have a policy and will not be guided against that. That's it. Questions? I'll be hanging around. I know Nick probably overstayed my welcome, but you were too kind to kick me out. So did you learn something? And again, just those few changes in the listing contract, the buyer rep agreement, we'll be teaching to that because it will get confusing. So thanks for coming.
Greg, we genuinely appreciate. Go ahead, guys. We genuinely appreciate you pouring into us because this is an important time for us to be on our game. So thank you. Guys, we have lunch in the back. It is back there. I don't know what it is, but it is back there. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey, do you guys know about Soda Summit next Monday?
Say more.
Minnesota Association of Realtors having a Soda Summit.
Wasn't that the broker summit? It's a broker deal. Yeah.
At the Sheraton, Bloomington.
But it's a broker deal.
I was told it's if you're a member, it's 149 or 199.
Oh, they opened it to everybody. So according to Mark and Marty, it's open to everybody. So, and how much is it?
49 if you're a member, 199 if you're not a member.
Or you let Greg go and he brings the information back. I don't know. All right, guys. Go have a really great day. Kick some ass, help somebody. I guess it's pizza in the back, so make it happen.